Our next reader is Cynthia Morrison Phoel, who's the author of Cold Snap, Bulgaria Stories. She has the distinction of being a multiple-time recipient of the Massachusetts Cultural Council Artist Fellowship, having also won in 2004 in a guest post that she wrote for our blog, Artsake. Cindy described how she wanted to write fiction about her experience in the Peace Corps in Bulgaria, but it wasn't until she allowed herself to write through the voices of the people she experienced there, rather than a voice outside them, that the work truly came alive. So breakthrough for her and for us, her readers and her audience. Please help me welcome Cynthia Phoel.
Hi, it's really nice to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful to the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Both of the grants I've received have supported my book, Cold Snap, which is set in a small Bulgarian mountain village where I served as a high school English teacher in the mid-1990s. The stories are 5 stories and a novella, so the stories are linked because they all take place in that mountain village. But there's also characters that recur, one of which is a dog who I've discovered is, for most people, their favorite character in the book. And he finds his way into most of the stories, and I'll introduce you to him tonight. So there are these 5 linked stories, and then all the characters come back and make an encore performance in a novella. That is the second half of the book. So I was a high school English teacher, and I was 22 years old, right out of college, and I had to teach all of the English students in my town. So I had 250 students in 10 different classes. One of those classes, I had 4 girls named Galia. And the challenge of just learning everyone's name was incredible, and I needed to get a handle on it fast because I was only a few years older than my students, and they had not liked the American who preceded me. So I had these 4 students named Galia, and I remember 2 of them. The one of whom I remember because she did absolutely no work for me and never said anything in class. And she was unlike the other students in that regard because I had really, really wonderful students in Bulgaria. And so I gave Galia 4 scores, and one day a teacher kind of called me out in the hallway, just really lit into me about giving a colleague's daughter these poor scores. And I found out after I got on the plane that they changed my scores for Galia. So she's kind of stuck with me all these years, I guess, and I didn't know her very well, and I wondered what happens. And I don't think she's that much different than a lot of people, but you know, I kind of wondered, so you know, what happens when your life is arranged that way? And so I'm going to read to you from a story called Galia. Galia's parents were the kind who bought a bar of chocolate before she asked for it. Approaching middle age when they had her, they'd had time to anticipate her needs. They bought shoes before she could walk, a dictionary before she could talk, and a battery of pens, pencils, and paintbrushes when her fingers were still doughy and fat. They purchased her grades in batches at the start of the Bulgarian school year. They could get a whole semester of 6s with a side of pork or wool enough to knit 2 sweaters. They bought her ticket to university a year in advance. They bought her valedictory remarks from Petya Dojeva, the smartest girl in class. For a 10-minute speech printed on note cards, Petya charged the amount she needed to cover the university entrance exam fee. Petya got a near perfect score on the exam, and still the university couldn't find a place for her. When the word got out, Petya would work in a cafe the next year and retake the entrance exam the following summer. Galia refused to leave the apartment, even to buy bread. She didn't want to see anyone. least of all Petya. Galia's Tadko said if Petya was really smart, she would have taken her tutoring money and lined the pocket of a university professor. Petya hasn't learned the most important lesson, Tati said. By now she should know, you get what you pay for. Tati's most recent purchase, Vladi, is asleep on the bed. It's 2:15 in the morning, and the room is black, except for a sallow sphere of light from the bedside lamp. His smell is a combination of stale and sour, saturated as he is from a full day of drinking the first shot of rakia, taken at 9 a.m. He looks peaceful, hair scalping the top of his forehead, mouth open just enough for guttural sleep sounds to escape, except for the scar on his arm. It runs from his shoulder to his elbow, a centimeter thick and round like a rope stitched to his bicep, red, lumpy, and enraged. The doctors say it will never go away, which is good, she knows, for Vladi's sake. He needs that scar, that angry piece of evidence, much more than he needs a wife or a father-in-law who buys him things. They hardly spoke after Tati dropped them off at the hotel. The hour-long ride from Old Mountain to Sofia in Tati's police car had finished them off, with Tati talking the whole way about the disaster with Petya Dochova's mother and Stefan Nachev on the dance floor. How they had groped each other like animals, Tati yelled, and wouldn't stop, not even when first Petya, then Tati suggested they sit down. How he'd known something bad was going to happen, the way they were humping and bumping so close to the band. How they were lucky no one had been killed when the equipment came crashing down, cords ripped out of the wall, speakers knocked off tripods. Galia could only assume the crash reverberated in Vladi's head the way it did in hers, a throbbing echo of the day's events that refused to subside. After they checked in, Vladi spent $50 on Marlboros from the hotel bar. He didn't look at Galia when he took the wad of wedding money out of his jacket pocket and peeled off the bills. He could have bought the cigarettes for a fraction of the price anywhere else. As he was counting out the money, he stopped and looked at Galia, his eyes yolk yellow and his skin peppered with blackened pores. He just stood there, fists filled with money, willing her to say something. But Galia's mind was white. White dress with a row of buttons hard to undo. White sheets pulled taut across the bed. White skin never exposed to sun. She flushed, fish-mouthed, desperate for words that would not come. Up in the room, Vladi lit a cigarette and turned on the TV. This was how he was. He could be in a room for 1 minute without needing the TV. You drain me, he said, blowing smoke from his nose and staring at the soccer match on the screen. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm with nobody. Galia knew she should be hurt by this, but in truth, she was relieved. This was not so bad, she thought. This was not the worst thing to say. Vladi's words were not kind, but they also were not untrue. Vladi saw her for who she was, one of those fake Gucci purses that looks okay on the shelf but splits at the seams as soon as you put anything inside. In a way, she was grateful Vladi already understood this about her. There would be no surprises. Tears seep from the corners of Galia's eyes. She is overcome with gratitude for this unexpected reprieve. Her nightdress is damp with steam, and her curly hair has frizzed into a thick wedge. She was in the bathroom too long, fretting about whether to lock the door, what to wear, the things they would do when they shared a bed. She had worried until her head hurt and her hands trembled and her gums bled from brushing her teeth. Even after so much brushing, she can still taste Vladi's smoky kisses on the church altar, the municipality stairs, the dance floor, 3 of them in total, each one lasting a little longer than the one before. Looking at his lips now, she tries to remember how they felt, pressed against her. Mostly she recalls they tasted of cigarettes, and at the moment they kissed, Vladi had closed his eyes. To her mother's chagrin, she had not followed suit. Need to cough, Galche, Micah had said. The next time you close your eyes, you'll scare him if you keep your eyes open. Each time Galia vowed she would close her eyes, but each time she failed her mother's command. Why do you do that? Her mother hissed at her in the bathroom stall. But Galia could not explain the tenderness she found in the oily lines creasing Vladdy's eyelids. Though she knew from the movies closing one's eyes was normal kissing behavior, she believed then, as she does now. With Vladdy, it was something more. Something born not out of habit, but intention. Not out of disgust, but mercy. With Vladdy asleep, Galia is more alone than she's been all day. She was not allowed to dress herself or do her own hair. When she was securely fettered by button, clasp, and pin, her mother had followed her everywhere, even to the bathroom where she held the gown out of harm's way. Galia had been squeezed and kissed and hugged and carried, none of which was as difficult for her to bear as the fact of the purchase, the sale being celebrated. That Vladdy is sleeping through the final stages of the transaction by no means nullifies the deal. Nevertheless, Galia feels more at peace than she has in months. There is comfort, albeit small, in knowing moments like this will exist. They can share the same room and not be together. Several hours into her marriage, she is unchanged and untouched, safe and separate and alone. Leaving the TV and lights as they are, Galia sinks into a chair, moving quietly to preserve Vladdy's sleep. The room is too cold, but she does not mind. The flow of air from a vent in the wall gives her something to think about. How her goose-pimpled arms look, thin and milky blue in the nightdress she has chosen, a thick pink cotton, pleasingly opaque so as to reveal nothing. Only now does it strike her that the tiny embroidered flowers sprinkling the gown are suggestive of something. Sweetness, purity. At once, the gown seems oddly out of tune with the night's intentions. The hotel bed is, after all, as long and wide as a trampoline. Quickly, she is caught in a swirl of fear and regret. She knows where she is headed, down the well-trod path of could-haves, should-haves, and if-onlys, her destination being the damning, how could she let this happen? When Galia was 5, she watched the lady behind the counter rest her finger on the scale when she weighed cheese for the customer at the front of the line. The lady would not do this to Micah, but she would do it to a woman with a thin coat and scuffed purse. Galia knew what the shop lady was doing. She stared at the thick finger resting on the scale until the lady caught her watching. The line leading up to the counter was long, and people looked cross. The lady looked cross, too. "Why don't you wait for your mother outside?" she said. "Here's a piece of laccoon. You can eat this outside." Galia understood she had done something wrong. The finger was large, and from where she stood, her head just below the counter, it was not difficult to see. But no one else noticed it. She shouldn't have noticed it either. Micah transferred the powdered sweet from the shop lady's thick fingers to Galia's palm. "You wait right outside," she said, nudging her toward the door. "Don't go anywhere." Outside, another girl was waiting for her mother, only she had moved beyond the door and was talking to a hairless dog standing in the square. "Can you see, Krastovica? How many fingers am I holding up?" Krastovica could not count the fingers, but clearly he enjoyed the attention. His tail wagged, and his whole body wagged with it. Nibbling on her square of Turkish delight, Galia wondered if the dog was really named Krastovica. Cucumber was just the right name for the tubular dog. She wondered if all dogs were so round beneath their fur. "How many fingers, Krastovica?" The girl was holding up 3 fingers. "Come on, Krastovica, my fingers are getting tired." The girl was starting to sound angry. Krastovica cowered on the ground. "I said, how many fingers?" 3, Galia blurted out. The girl clapped her hands, and Krastovica jumped up and barked. "Very good, Krastovica. Now how many?" Galia waited, giving Krastovica a chance to answer on his own. 2, she finally said. Good, Krastovica, the girl said. You are very smart. At that moment, the woman with the thin coat emerged from the shop and passed Galia on the stair. Petya, she called sharply. Galia wondered if she was poor because she spent so much money on cheese. Are you talking to that sick dog? No, Petya said, scrambling to her feet. Then who are you talking to? Petya looked at Galia, and even though they appeared to be close in age, Galia withered beneath her gaze. I was talking to my imaginary friend, Petya said. That's not what I saw, the woman said. Hayde, Petya. It's time to go home. The girl joined her mother and they set off down the square. Though the girl had been very small, she loomed large in Galia's memory, for when she named the hairless creature who wandered the square Krastovica, she gave the dog an identity, and when she called Galia her imaginary friend, at once Galia understood her place in the world. It was less a revelation than it was a recognizable fit, the way Krastovica's naked skin sheathed his tubular body like a fine suit, or the way her sneakers felt, so nice and light on her feet that after a few minutes Galia could almost forget them, the shoes, and even more, the feet inside them. For by the time Galia met Petya in the square, she'd already glimpsed her own irrelevance in the chemistry set sitting on her shelf, the telescope poised at her window, the typewriter centered on her desk. When these things appeared in her bedroom, she did not know what to make of them. Micah and Tati expected her to put them to use. She filled the chemistry vials with buttons from her mother's sewing box and played the typewriter the way she'd seen a man in the square type on his accordion, though she could not lift it from the desk. She played and sang along to the taut clicking noises she produced until her mother got concerned and put the typewriter away. It was a life arranged and planned for, requiring a careful squelching of unwanted tendencies and a perseverance in sculpting an idea. As soon as Tatko announced her engagement, Micah put Galia on a dress. On a diet. The dress was tailored not to the body as it was, but as it would be. Sure enough, by the day of the wedding, Galia was bony and angular, Kato model her mother admired, and the dress fit like a sleeve over Galia's perfected form. Stop there.